Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much to the Congresswoman for being here. Yes. You've been busy lately.
Well, always.
So it's wonderful to have you here to start off a conversation about brain health and about Alzheimer's, as you are co-chair of the Congressional Task Force on Alzheimer's Disease, which of course is a bipartisan committee. So is this one of the few things that the two sides are really in agreement about, that more funding needs to be dedicated toward Alzheimer's?
Well, as you have said, we have bipartisan work on Alzheimer's. And so the members from both sides of the aisle get together and we agree on what we're going to go after in terms of resources, appropriations for Alzheimer's. And we also decide on public policy, aside from the appropriations aspect of it. We're looking to see what else we can do in order to give support to caregivers and to patients. And so it's a good working relationship. I know that as our citizens view what is going on in Washington, D.C., they think we're so polarized we can't get anything done. But this is one area where we're working together.
When there is so much else going on, I think a lot of people do look at the government and wonder, can you work on other things? Can you do other things in addition to the huge national impeachment story that's happening right now?
Well, absolutely. And unfortunately, the press focuses on the most controversial. And so impeachment is at the forefront of the media discussion. But a lot of other work is going on. For instance, today in my committee, we are going to be working on some very important issues. We've passed some very important issues out of the committee. We have to reauthorize XM. That is the bank that's responsible for helping us to improve our ability to export our goods and our services. It's a very important bill. We've just about come to an agreement with both sides of the aisles working on it. I'm working together with the ranking member, who is a Republican, on my committee on the reauthorization of the National Flood Insurance Program. We just agreed on TRIA to deal with funding and assistance to our insurance companies to ensure that in the case of terrorism, where we have massive destruction, that could not be, of course, in the cost of premiums. And so when you have these massive destructive hurricanes, et cetera, the insurance companies have to get some support in order to ensure that we can rebuild and reconstruct. And so we're working on all these issues. And of course, healthcare is at the top of our agenda, dealing with making sure there's affordable healthcare for everybody, and we've got to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. And so when you add that to what we'd like to have moving in the Congress, dealing with the repair of our infrastructure, and of course some of the other issues, a lot is going on. It just does not get covered.
Right.
Yeah.
On the prescription drug front, and then I'm going to transition into Alzheimer's because there's a lot to discuss, but there seems to be agreement in some ways from the House Democrats and even possibly the administration on drug prices and a need to focus on that issue. And it seems maybe the sticking point is Senate Republicans. Is that right? And what's your expectation that these bills can get through on drug pricing?
Well, I am very, very optimistic about the two sides coming together around prescription drugs. It's a matter of how many and what drugs are going to be covered. I think there are some of us who would like to see a lot more drugs given consideration to be negotiated. And right now, we're still working on what drugs and how many.
Alzheimer's disease. So you're on this congressional task force, you help lead it. Is there a personal connection that you have to Alzheimer's, or why is this a particular interest area for you?
Well, I'm particularly interested in Alzheimer's for a number of reasons. Of course, it's very difficult sometimes to get beyond those areas where you are working in your committee. I have financial services, and that's a huge responsibility, where we're dealing with all of Wall Street, we're dealing with private equity, we're dealing with hedge funds, we're dealing with oversight of all of the agencies of government, the SEC, which is our cop on the block, and the OCC, and the Treasury, and all of that. But I said I had to find time to deal with a disease that's going to bankrupt America if, in fact, we can't get a handle on research and cure. And so, yes, of course, I think I and many families in America and all over the world are dealing with someone, a relative, someone in their family, friends who are the victims of dementia, of Alzheimer's. And in my own family, my mother, who eventually passed several years ago, before passing, had basically become the victim of Alzheimer's. And of course, I have friends, and I have members of Congress who talk to me about what's going on in their families every day. And they're the sad stories about children whose parents don't recognize them anymore after they've gotten to a certain advanced degree of Alzheimer's. And there are those, of course, who have lost and their family members. And of course, we also have many of our younger people who are now the caregivers for both mother and father, two people in the family, and finding it difficult to go to work every day and be responsible for this care. And it is absolutely a huge strain on some of the young people. As a matter of fact, one of my best friends who just passed, her son was her caretaker, and he died before she did. The stress of it, I think, is what killed him. He was very devoted to his mother. He lived with her, he took care of her, and we were shocked when he passed. And we could not believe that this young man had passed long before his mother had passed. And so there's so many stories. And yes, in my family, in other families, all over the world, and here in this country, we have a disease that we've got to get a handle on. And that requires that we spend a lot of money on research. And we cannot hold back. It's going to cost a lot of money, but we must allocate that money. We must look for private sources. We must look for all the help that we can get to invest in the research that is so very necessary in order to get rid of Alzheimer's. There is a cure possible. I believe that.
The funding has been increasing over the past few years. What can you tell us about what's coming up for potentially next year's funding levels, budget expectations?
Okay, well, I sure did bring my notes because I want everybody to know. We have a national plan, as you know, to address Alzheimer's disease for a cure for an effective treatment for Alzheimer's by 2025. That's our goal. In order to do that, we have to work very hard. I've worked very hard on research funding. In 2015, Alzheimer's research received about $586 million. In funding year 2019, it is $2.3 billion. So we have been successful in doing what we need to do to continue to educate the members of Congress and to get the appropriations increased significantly. This year, I've requested an additional $350 million increase in funding for a total appropriation for $2.65 billion in 2020. A total of 130 members of Congress signed on to the bill in support of it. So we have tremendous support, and I'm looking forward to the increase to $2.65 million for 2020.
Right.
Yes.
I saw that I heard some clapping, I think, that you were at the Alzheimer's conference recently. What have you observed that the increased funding has made possible? What excites you that you've observed in the field?
Well, I'm excited about research and technology. Yes, I was at the conference, and I walked through, I believe it was at our convention center, and I saw so many new ideas and new ways of talking about testing and about patient care. And so there's a lot going on, and much of that is not reliant upon the money from federal government. We have private industry who are spending tremendous dollars for their research efforts without the support from the federal government. So I do believe that with the interest that I have seen and with the interest of so many who are anxious to find a cure, that we will find one and that our goal is realistic.
And you mentioned testing. When you think about outreach to the traditionally underrepresented populations of people who may not be getting quite the same access to care, who may not be the focus of some of the big drug companies in their clinical trials necessarily, what do you think needs to be done to make sure everybody is addressed who faces the burden of Alzheimer's?
Well, you know, when I think back about what I have seen and experienced, as many people have seen and experienced in their lifetime, there was one time when we didn't know a lot about Alzheimer's, we didn't know a lot about dementia, and it was pretty acceptable as you grow old that somehow you were going to be disassociated, that you were thought of as being crazy, or that that's what happens at a certain age. First thing we need to know is we're experiencing Alzheimer's at a younger and younger age. And there's so many families still that don't know that it is not acceptable to see mother or daddy or grandfather or grandmother somehow losing touch and do nothing about it. They just think that that is supposed to happen. And so we have to encourage and educate folks on testing. And then there are others who, when they begin to lose their memory in a substantial way, and I don't want everybody to think about there isn't some loss of memory as you grow older, and it is not always Alzheimer's. Just because you can't find the keys or you don't remember where you parked, that happens to most of us.
That happens to me. I'm 34.
Yeah, I know. As a matter of fact, I'm hesitant to go into the big parking garages anymore because I've experienced it so many times. But I do think that jotting it down makes good sense. So it's not that you know, people should be so worried about that. I think that there are folks, many, who even themselves begin to realize that something is wrong. Or if you're observant, and of course just being observant does not mean that you have to do anything extraordinary, just being with your family members and friends when you realize certain things, I think that there should be an opportunity taken to address it in some way. So we need to get the word out that it is okay to be tested. As a matter of fact, I've been dealing with a very fine brain surgeon who talks about everything from nutrition to other health needs that should be taken care of, that can be helpful in preventing or at least slowing down a bit. And so I'm very optimistic that if we can educate, if we can get the word out, that if we can help people to understand that testing is extremely important. And for those people who have their yearly checkups, ask your doctor about it. Find out what your doctor knows about it, or if your doctor can give you a reference to speak with someone who's specializing in this disease so that they can take that information back and share it. All of these things need to be done. We need public service announcements, and we need funding that helps support outreach, and particularly into communities that are not yet connected because they're not on the internet, they're not interacting with others, they're confined inside the communities, inside their homes. We just need to do more to get people understanding that testing is extraordinarily important.
Right, there are things you can do even
Yes.
before there's a potential
That's
treatment
right.
out there.
Absolutely.
Right. Congresswoman, thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. Is that it?
That's all.
All right. I must say one thing before I go. I want to thank the Milken Institute, and I want to thank Mike Milken for not only addressing the economic concerns of our society, but the health concerns. This is one aspect of what the Institute is doing relative to health. As you know, they've been involved with cancer research, and that has been so important. And getting the word out in the way that the Milken Institute has helped to do has gotten men getting tested more and getting men understanding what they can do if, in fact, they become the victims of cancer. And so I'm very pleased to be here. Sorry, I can't spend more time, but thank you, Milken Institute, so very much.